Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class today. Jason is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. And I was telling Jason that at the end of yesterday's broadcast, Nathan, who engineers this broadcast, he assists Jason every once in a while, and Jason is off doing something else. And our engineers help each other. They work together and so forth. And I was saying thank you. This was after the broadcast ended. The commercials were playing at the end of the broadcast. And I said, what I usually say, hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it. You guys did a great job. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll say things like, we've got Guineith tomorrow and, so forth. Ricky on Thursday. And, I give him a heads up as to what's going to happen. And I thank him. And it's like 15 seconds because I know they're really busy getting ready for the next broadcast. And so Nathan, who has been with us for years and years and years, wonderful man. He's a musician, as is Jason. He said, thanks. I wrote it down. I was so impressed with what he said. I wrote it down. Thank you for bringing content. That's what he said. And it was such a nice compliment. And I was talking about, the book, the unfinished, unpublished, unorganized, not for sale book. And I thought that was really just the kindest, nicest thing. And so, thank you, Nathan. I appreciate it. Well, today, in the front of the classroom, from across the ocean, at night, Guineith Isaacs. Welcome, Guineith.
Hello, Vincent. How are you today?
Just great. And I was thinking, Guineith, that the temperature has dropped dramatically in the last 2 weeks here. What's happened in Australia? Have you seen a temperature change maybe on the upswing?
Not quite yet. It's moved into spring-type weather. I don't think we'll be getting any more frost this year because our farm is sort of up in the hills a little bit. We sometimes get frost, but we never get it to the point where the soil's frozen. Do you know what I mean? So there's no permafrost here. Mm-hmm. So, but we will get a surface, what I call a surface frost, mm-hmm. that comes across the surface of the soil and the surface of all the plants. So it might kill some plants, but it will never kill the roots. It doesn't mm-hmm. freeze the soil. So I don't think that we'll be getting any more of that sort of weather this year. I think that we are moving into a La Nina weather pattern, which is going to mean drought for you and flooding rains for us. So that's probably going to be happening over the last portion of this year and into early next year. So if you're hoping for a nice, moist summer, I don't think you're going to get it. But I think that we're going to get really unseasonably wet weather here, which is good for us because we live in a semi-arid climate. And I've been busy preparing for this I recently, over the last couple of weeks, I know I've written this in emails to you, but I'm not sure if I've told the class, that I hired a bulldozer and a bulldozer driver to go in and redo one of our dams. And that was a really, really big job. And it cost around about 600 Australian dollars, but it was certainly worth it to get a bulldozer and a bulldozer driver in here to do that job, because now that dam wall is about 14 feet high, and when it's full, the water will be about 10 feet deep, and it's across a valley, and so it's going to be quite a good addition to our farm water supply. But the other thing is, I had to dig an overflow. If you're going to put in a dam of any type, whether it's what we call in this country a turkey nest dam, where you basically build up a circular or square mound of dirt, and then you have an entry in from overland flow of water, or whether it's a dam across a valley, you must build an overflow into the dam, or that will take the excess water and channel it away from the dam and down the side of it somewhere, away from the dam wall. Otherwise, when your dam fills, the water is somehow going to find a way out, and if it goes over the top, you're going to lose your dam. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yes, and we call them overflows here. So, class, think of it like this. Think of it like a measuring cup. And on the measuring cup, you have at one side of it a little spout, so you can pour off whatever's in the measuring cup. So what happens is, think of it like this. Think of the rim of the measuring cup all being at the same height, but you have a little depression, which would be the pouring spout. So what happens, if you held that measuring cup level and you started filling that cup up with water, when the water got almost to the top of the rim, it would start pouring out the spout. That's what Guineith is talking about. And all of the dams that we have here on our property that make ponds have them. Because if you don't have one, if the pond can overfill the whole wall that supports the water, keeps the water in the pond, will collapse. So you want to, it's also called a little spillway, but we have them.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that's great. So Guineith, what does it cost per hour? Do they charge you by the hour or by the job?
This particular one was by the job. Okay. But it works out about the same. I think that he's just really good at quoting about how many hours he thinks it will take. For an excavator man of any description, whether it's a bobcat or a bulldozer or, an excavator, which is the cup-type excavator is the arm that sort of digs in, you can expect to pay between $100 and $200 per hour. And this particular job took between 3 and 4 hours, which means that he got paid approximately $150 per hour. So that's ballpark for what you pay. And you might think that that's a generous, or the class might think, gee, that's a good wage. That's a good pay packet for, that man for that day. But the degree of skill that is required to be a good bulldozer driver is quite considerable. And usually I've found that it's best to hire old bulldozer drivers that have been driving for years, because they are going to have the most skill at doing their job. And you've got to take into account that this machinery is expensive. And usually they've had to take out loans to get the machinery. And usually they have to buy an 18-wheeler as well to transport the machinery, because it's pretty big machinery, you know. So, and then they've got the motor vehicle registrations for the machinery, you know, for the 18-wheeler, the trailer, and possibly if the dozer has a registration as well, so that it can be driven on the public roads, then, you know, not all of them do. But yeah, and then you've got the fuel, and then he probably has insurance, liability insurance and such like as well. So, you know, he's probably getting a working man's wage, but there's a lot of expenses there as well. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Right. Absolutely.
Worth his salt is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and you're right about an older / more experienced operator, because when you're moving soil, you're doing dirt work, you really need to know about weight, you need to know about hydraulics, you need to know what's level, you need to know how to compact it, you know, depending on what you're trying to do. You know, you can get in a bulldozer and you can push a tree over and you can kill yourself. Or, as you've seen on, you know, videos on YouTube, people have hired, you know, the guy that cuts the lawn to, oh yeah, I can take that tree down, sure. And they drop the tree on the house. So there's a lot to it. I mean, you really need to know what you're doing. And you're right. And what we did, Guineith, we bought a bulldozer. Actually, it's called a track hoe. And it's well, actually it would be called it's a big bucket on the front. So it's more than just pushes the dirt. This thing has a scoop on the front, so it can push the dirt and it can pick it up. A bulldozer just pushes it around. So we bought one of these things for $3,500. Now that may seem like a lot of money, or it may seem like a little bit of money. But if you think about it, at $100 an hour, if nothing breaks and fuel were free, that would be 35 hours and it would pay for itself. So less than a week's worth of work, and it would pay for itself. But, you know, it was an old machine, and it's like pennies per pound. This thing weighs 25,000 pounds. But it's not going off the farm because we don't have a truck and a trailer that can pull it. I mean, if you need a really big truck and a really big trailer to pull it. And we have a big trailer, but it certainly can't hold the weight. So this thing is just to, you know, clear fire breaks and to do maintenance, you know, clean up the farm. So if the trees start getting out of control and we need to, the trees want more of the pasture and more of the field, and we decide that, no, if they can't have it, we'll just push them back. And that's what this is all about. So, $100 an hour, $150 an hour, that's reasonable, because a new machine, actually what we have is called a track loader, meaning it's got like a bulldozer track and you can load with it. I guess the new one's probably $100,000. We'll be right back. Well, you know, I've been telling you that prices are going up, class, and quality equipment, you know, chargers and, you know, battery chargers and things that tools have doubled in price. Well, I thought a new loader would be a crawler loader would be about $100,000. I was off. You can get a 2019 Caterpillar 953 crawler loader, which is the new model of what we have, $225,000.
Wow.
That's kind of $225,000. And I found the one that we have that we paid $3,500 for. You can buy one on eBay right now. It's called a CAT, as in Caterpillar brand, model 941B. $16,000 for one like ours that we paid $3,500 for. And the interesting thing is, when was it made? This model 941, they were made around 1970. That means 50 years old, pushing dirt around, doing really hard work. So these things have been used for 50 years, this particular model, and they're still available for sale. So that's good, old-fashioned, quality American hardware. Well-made, durable. And I don't know what it cost when it was new 50 years ago, but I'll bet you it wasn't all that much more than $16,000. Yeah, well, maybe it was, $30,000. I don't know. But prices have gone up, and skills are really, really hard to find. Really hard to find. At every level. Frankly, we can't even find people who know how to change the oil properly on a vehicle today. So, Guineith, you've got a lot for our class today. Where would you like to start?
Okay. I would love to start with potatoes and apples, but actually I think I ought to start with how things are going down here in Victoria, because I think that's a bit more important. But I would like to get onto, the farm-related stuff later on in the broadcast. But, oh my gosh, we are at the point, okay? It's very important for the class to understand what I'm saying, what I'm going to be saying in this broadcast, and that I am absolutely not advocating going and burning cities down, okay? But we are at the point where if these people come to your door, you need to actively resist them. You need to, because they need to, okay, I think that there was a fellow, and his name was called Alexander Solzhenitsyn, okay, and he wrote a book a number of years ago called The Gulag Archipelago, and we are not here in Victoria in the Gulag Archipelago anymore. Looking back, I would say that we've had the Gulag Archipelago for at least the last 25 years here in Victoria. And I first moved to Victoria when I was 17, and now I'm 45. So I've been here for a lot of that time, not all of it, but for a lot of that time. We are now just in the Gulag. It's like that. It's especially in Melbourne. Not so much in country Victoria, because I think that the Victoria Police are aware that there are a lot of firearms, both registered and unregistered, hanging around on farms out in the Victorian countryside. That a lot of the farmers did not actually ever get their firearms registered. They knew what was coming down the track, and they decided that they didn't want to be pushed around in that way. And not only that, that the gun registration rules that the government set up were just completely impractical, and they decided at some point that they just weren't going to do it. Now, for that reason, I don't think that their stupid rules will ever be that strictly enforced in the Victorian countryside. Now, that said, I might have projectile firing devices on this farm, but projectile firing devices does not mean firearms. There are other types of projectile firing devices as well. I just thought I'd point that out.
Hold that thought. Guineith Isaacs is with us. Guineith, let me just take a side detour here for just a second. At the bottom of the hour news, we just heard about the Breonna Taylor's shooting death by the police in Louisville, Kentucky. And the Attorney General is going to make an announcement as to what will be the decision regarding charging the officers who shot dead Breonna Taylor, murdered her. And Louisville right now is being boarded up, and it's on lockdown. Literally, buildings are being boarded up in the event that there will be protests, which will, I'm pretty darn sure, will escalate into rioting. And why is that? Because the Attorney General has not announced the decision as to what he's going to do regarding the officers that just fired, one fired 10 rounds into Breonna Taylor's apartment from outside. Okay?
Wow.
She was a victim. She didn't do anything. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong victim. And so they have boarded up a federal building called the Missouri Federal Building in Louisville, plywooded windows. So you know what this means. This means that the Attorney General is not going to pursue this as the villagers would want. So it's probably going to be that the officers who murdered this woman will get off without doing any time. That's what it sounds like to me. And because of that, they are boarding up the city. So instead of investigating and instead of trying these officers who, with their guns are allowed to murder people, they're boarding up the city. I believe that the violence will be extremely costly in the city of Louisville, in the state of Kentucky, in the country of the United States. I think that's coming, and I think that the government of the city knows darn well what the Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, is going to do. I believe they know what the announcement is. I believe that they know what the fallout is going to be. And they're right. So instead of doing the right thing and bringing these officers who murdered this woman in her apartment, who was doing nothing wrong, instead of charging them, they're going to, I believe, let them get away with murder and the city will burn. And of course, I'm not advocating it. It's clear as day to me. I don't think I'm wrong on this one either. So,
no.
Just one more case of abuse of power and cover-up and circling the wagons by the blue team, also called the black team, which has nothing to do with the color of people's skin. It has to do with the color of the costumes that these people wear. They have gone from tan and beige to black. They wear black costumes now. And I'm not talking about black people. I'm talking about people wearing black costumes that are called police uniforms. That's what I'm talking about. So, Guineith, you were talking, did you have any comments on that, or do you want to go on to the visits to one's property by a group of individuals?
Yeah, I would like to make a comment about this Breonna Taylor thing. One of the videos that I came across, all these videos are out there. You just have to go onto YouTube and type in Channel 9 Australia or Sky News Australia, and you'll see these videos that I'm talking about. There's one video where they're saying, the public need to respect the police. And this was because some people have decided that they're going to start fighting back when the popo come for them, instead of just meekly holding up their hands and allowing themselves to be arrested. And so these people, they're now kicking, biting, screaming, hitting, and all the rest of it when the police decide that they want to abduct them instead of meekly allowing themselves to be abducted. And they actually had a senior police officer on. I can't remember who it was. It may have been the New South Wales Police Commissioner or the Deputy Commissioner or whoever it was, saying, you must respect the police. But what these people are so disconnected from reality, because in the real world, I'm not just talking about the police, I'm talking about generally as well, you can't demand respect from anyone. You have to earn respect in this world. People don't just hand out respect willy-nilly. If you're a person who at least tries to do the right thing, who is a man or a woman of your word, who, has some sense of moral justice in your heart and tries to do to other people what you would want them to do to you, then you get respect. Okay? It's like a currency, a spiritual or psychic currency. That's what respect is. You can't demand respect from anyone, because in the act of demanding respect, you actually destroy the respect that may have been current. So this is something that they don't understand. They're so disconnected. It's so frustrating even to speak to them. They're so low IQ. They don't understand. They don't know the law. They don't know anything about justice. What are they even doing wearing a uniform? No, they don't protect us. They protect tyrants who are oppressing us. And we've got every right to stand up against tyrants who want to oppress us, steal from us, physically hurt us, and murder us, and rob us of our land. It's like this. One of the things that they're going to do here in Victoria is that they're going to have authorized personnel, authorized officers come to you or your property, and they're going to say, yeah, we've got the right to kidnap you and take you away, lock you in a cage and make you disappear. And there's actually an article in the Australian Spectator, so that's the website is www.spectator.com.au, and it's saying that if they wanted to, this is a product of Daniel Andrews, our state premier, and he said, and in the Spectator, it pointed out that if you wanted to appoint a Hells Angel Motorcycle Club member to be one of these authorized officers, there would literally be nothing there to stop Daniel Andrews from appointing all the Hells Angels motorcycle gangsters to be authorized officers for the Victorian government. And Vincent, that would not go well. And I can tell you something. If the Hells Angels ever pulled up to this gate and thought that they could take my farm off me, okay, I would meet them at the gate and I would say, you are not coming on, and I'm going to defend my property. And I don't know what my chances would be like of succeeding, but at that point it wouldn't really matter, because the people who stand up against this type of tyranny are going to be the people who are most likely to survive this type of tyranny. And that's been proven over and over and over and over again throughout history. And one example that the historians point out all the time is the French resistance during World War II. And I'm going to tell the class something. This is I've heard this more than once from historians, that the segment of the population that had the highest survival rate in Nazi-occupied France during World War II was actually the members of the French resistance, okay, which might sound counterintuitive, but the people who had the lowest survival rate long-term of any group in occupied France during World War II were actually the Nazi collaborators. And people might say, well, wouldn't it be the Jews? And I said, no, actually it wasn't the Jews. It was the Nazi collaborators had the lowest survival rate, because when the Nazis got kicked out of France, people went hunting. And they hunted out these Nazi collaborators who were generally well known to be Nazi collaborators within their local communities. And they went hunting, and they made use of tree limbs and pieces of rope. And they made use of their fists. They made use of kitchen knives, pitchforks, shovels, spades, picks, and hoes to, vent their feelings on these Nazi collaborators. And most of them did not survive. And the only ones that did survive were the likes of George Soros and Henry Kissinger, who were not in France, okay? I think that George Soros came from Hungary, and Henry Kissinger, I'm not sure where he came from. He came from Nazi-occupied Europe somewhere. But they were both Nazi collaborators. But the same was true throughout Nazi-occupied Europe. Once the Nazis had their backsides handed to them on a plate at the end of World War II, the local villagers went hunting. And that's just very, very well documented, because they were hated. And most of them who didn't have the power and the connections to get out of there ended up dead at the end of the war. And there was nobody to help them. And it was especially true of people who wore uniforms. They were more hated than anyone. But even down to the local prostitute who had, Nazi soldiers as their clients. They would they would drag her out of her house, by her hair, and for starters, they would beat her. The woman of the village would beat her and pin her down and cut her hair off, and she would be utterly ostracized from the female community.
Guineith is with us live in Australia. Guineith, I have a couple comments about what you said. You'd mentioned the police, and you used 5 words, and I wrote them down. I think what you said was absolutely brilliant. And here they are. Correct me if I'm wrong. Police. And here are the 5 words. Protecting tyrants who oppress us. Protecting tyrants who oppress us. That's 5 words. That's what they do.
Yeah.
And if you want to pare that down to just 2 words, it's protecting tyrants. That's what they do. So that was one comment. The second comment, you mentioned the French resistance in World War II. So the Germans, the Nazis, occupied and destroyed France, a lot of France, during World War II. And there was a television series that was very close to real, very close. It was called Combat, C-O-M-B-A-T, exclamation point. It was originally aired between the years of 1962 and 1967, 5 years. And it was about the lives, these horrible experiences that the American army went through, fighting the Nazis in France. And there were many, many episodes that dealt with the French resistance. So these were the villagers, these were the farmers, these were the people who had backbone, who had guts, who were frosted that they were invaded by the Nazis. And so they did what they could to gum up the works and just drive the Nazis crazy by misguiding them, giving them bad information. And yet there were the French who were the Nazi collaborators. Those were the guys who thought, you know what, if we just side with these guys and we play nice with the Nazis, we'll get better treatment. And some did. And there's one episode in Combat, this television series, where there was a doctor. And the doctor was French, and he had a son who was in the American Army. And the son was looking for his father. And he found out that his father was living pretty well. And the reason, he discovered, was his father was a Nazi informant. He would inform on the French villagers who the Nazis would execute. So the doctor, the collaborator, the informant, the traitor to his own people was found out and was summarily executed by the villagers. And that's what you're talking about. So when you pick sides, you need to think about who you're selling out. And when the tides turn, those people that you've sold out, those people that you have plotted against, those people who you have oppressed, may have their way with you when the tides change. And they may hunt you down, and they may execute you and your family. It's happened over and over and over again throughout the millennia. There's nothing new to this. This isn't a new plan. This has been going on since before 2,000 years ago. There have been traitors, and they have been found out, and they have been dealt with. So the reason I'm mentioning this is so those of you who are in the government, and those of you who think it's okay to oppress us, tax us, and then when you need more money, tax us some more, and tax us again, and tax us multiple times on the same thing. It's a bad idea. It's a really bad idea to oppress the majority. It's a really bad idea to oppress the villagers. It's a really bad idea to oppress we the people. Because history has proven that, people like short bankers are hung from tall trees. And what I mean by that is there are bankers who steal and have stolen from their customers. And when the customers found out they've been had and stolen from by bankers, they get a piece of rope, they find a tree, and they hang a banker who's short on funds. I'm not talking about short in stature. I'm talking about short in morals. They've been hung from tall trees. That's happened over and over again in history. And we're teaching a history lesson here. We're not giving you a plan of action. We're just telling you this is what's happened in history. And it's going to happen again and again. And so the mayors and the governors and the village leaders who tell you what you're going to do, when the tides change, their health will be in jeopardy by the villagers whom they have oppressed. I'd love to hear your comments when we come back from the break, Guineith, on what I just said. Do you think it was accurate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think I'm misinformed?
Yep.
Yeah. All right, we'll be right back with Guineith Isaacs, live in Australia. Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Class, I mentioned that in this series Combat, there's an episode where a Nazi collaborator, a doctor, fed information to the Nazis, and as a result, his fellow villagers were killed by the Nazis. They wanted to know who was causing problems for the Nazis, and this doctor, who was a Frenchman in the village, ratted out his fellow villagers. Well, when the tides changed a little bit, the villagers, the French foreign resistance, or the French resistance, I should say, had their way with this doctor and his lifestyle of being well fed during a period of starvation came to an abrupt halt. And I live in the Wild West. Okay? There's just not much here in terms of infrastructure. There's no police in the town. It's an unincorporated town. It's still the Wild West. And 120 years ago or so, maybe a little over 120 years ago, here in Missouri and Kansas and Oklahoma, and other states, the Wild West, there was cattle rustlers. And they would literally steal other people's cattle. And they would take advantage of the hard work of their neighbors, the villagers, the ranchers, the cattle farmers. And the cattle farmers had grown tired of it very quickly. And what they did was they'd hang cattle thieves. Cattle rustlers were hung. The villagers would do it. They'd hang the criminals. And eventually the criminals got the idea that it's really painful when you get caught. So the villagers took it into their own hands. That is where we are headed, in my opinion. Of course, disclaimer, I'm not advocating it. It's clear as day to me that's where we're going. We're going down the road where the legal system isn't working all so well, right? So people are going to say, you know what, it takes too long. Yeah. So they're going to take care of it themselves.
Here in Victoria,
yeah,
because of what I call the Coco-La-Loco virus, they have decided to shut down jury trials until further notice. So there is no legal system here in Victoria until further notice. It's really interesting that, because I can think of at least one person who I would love to see in the docks on charges of high treason, and that's dictator Daniel Andrews. And I'm not the only one here. He's almost universally hated. That is nobody likes him. No, I go out and I think, what do you think of Daniel Andrews? And it's just hostility towards him. I get literally nobody coming up to me, you know, when we're out in public, on the rare occasions when I go into town, you know, for maybe a bit of supermarket shopping or to get some supplies or whatever, or pay a bill. Maybe I'll get somebody say, oh, well, you know, I'm not really going to say too much there. But most of the people, it's outright hostility towards him. He is not, he is hated. It's not just that he's not well liked, he's hated. And that's almost universal. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say, oh, yeah, we think he's a good guy, he's just doing his best, blah, 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 blah. That just doesn't happen, okay? So you see the polls saying, oh, about half of Victorians like him, they think he's doing a good job, and all the rest of it. I don't know who these people are, but they don't live around here. That is for sure, you know.
Guineith?
What you were saying about cattle rustlers was true, because in one of my previous incarnations, I was a highway woman, and my husband Archie was my partner in crime in that life, and his name was called Ralph Chaplin, and my name was called Lady Catherine Ferrers. And we didn't know our names when we were doing the past life regression work. We did the past life regression work from 1998 to 2003, and I only found out about Lady Catherine and Ralph Chaplin in 2018. So I had this big window of time where I didn't have a clue who we were, but I had this information that we'd gained in our past life regression work. And what happened to Ralph Chaplin was he was hung from a tree because, you know, he tried to rob someone, and someone's friends managed to surround him and overwhelm him, and they hung him from a tree on the side of the road. And a short period after that, in that life, I was shot during a bungled robbery of a cattle wagon. So a farmer's wagon being pulled by a couple of oxen, and there was apparently, I read in the history books, that I shot the driver of the cattle wagon, and he had two passengers in the back, and at least one of them had a firearm, and I saw the firearm at the last minute. I turned the horse to flee, but they shot me, and I bled to death on the way home, and I fell off my horse dead at the entrance to my secret chamber that I had underneath my manor house. And I still have the scars from that past life death wound, and it looks exactly like a bullet wound. And I also have internal liver scars as well. So I know that what you're saying is true because it happened to me and it happened to Archie. We were highwaymen, and Archie in that life was shot, and I was hung. Oh, sorry, Archie was hung, in that life, and I was shot. And that was the villagers deciding that they'd had enough of us and deciding that they wanted rid of us. They didn't know our identity, but they decided that, that they wanted to be able to travel freely. And there's karma there as well. But that, you're absolutely right. That happened. It was normal for that to happen. Because in that day, in England, they did have a police force, but it was pretty ineffective. And, it wasn't very organized, and they mostly just arrested people if they didn't look too dangerous. Oh, hang on, that's the same thing that happens now. Sorry, it's a bit of a sarcastic comment, but that's actually how it goes here in Victoria. They're very fond, the Victoria Police are very fond of bashing up, ladies walking down the road and little old ladies sitting on park benches, and they're very fond of arresting pregnant women in their own homes, because they decided they're going to post on Facebook that they're organising a public march in their local park. I don't see them going out and giving the likes of, I've said this before, the likes of Mick Gatto and Roberta Williams. These are prominent local gangsters for people in other parts of the world. And I don't see them giving the Hells Angels a bad time.
Okay, so how about this, Guineith? How about this? Our son and I were walking down our road, and we each had a 5-gallon bucket. And this vehicle stopped and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "We're picking up trash." Oh. And then went on her way. She was surprised that we had a 5-gallon bucket and we were picking up trash that other people threw out their windows on our dirt road. Now, the question I have for the class is, when was the last time you saw your mayor, your governor, your banker, your police officers, your city councilmen or women picking up trash? When?
Never.
And here's another thing. Right, never. Here's another thing. About 30 years ago, I was in Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I was at a gas pump. And I was pumping gas, and on the other side of the gas pump, another guy was pumping gas. And he pulled in, and I saw that, I had Virginia tags on our vehicle, and he had an Arkansas tag. And pretty much no one even knew where Arkansas was, before the 1990s. But when William Jefferson Blythe Clinton ran for president, then people said, Arkansas, I've heard of it, but where is it? Okay? I'm not exaggerating, class. Arkansas was an unknown. Literally. Nothing happened in Arkansas that made the news. Well, I said to this guy, so what do you think? What do you think about Bill Clinton running for president? You're from Arkansas. What do you think about that? He said, we are delighted that he's running for president, and we hope he wins so we can get him out of Arkansas.
Yeah. He's
that
evil.
is, okay, that is the polite way of getting rid of a blight. Okay? You get him out of town and he still gets to live. But that's not going to be the case every time going forward. And it's not the case every time in history. People saw the oppression and they eventually, the men, it was the men who would, because ladies were polite back then. Ladies didn't get involved. It's not that it was just a men's club. It's just that the men, were the guys that drove their own cattle and protected their ranches and farms, and that's what they did. They were the heads of households. And Guineith, I'm sure, would fit in just perfectly with these guys back then. But they took care of business, and they didn't like being taken advantage of. They didn't like having the bad guys in the village steal their cows. That was a capital crime, and they were executed. And I really feel that we're real close to that kind of thing happening again. Not by the state, not sanctioned by the state saying that we have the right to execute people. I'm talking about the villagers saying, we don't care what the state says. I think it's coming. Guineith, when we come back, do you think it's coming? Do you think it's right around the corner? Do you think that the violence is going to escalate in, around 7 weeks, a little less than 7 weeks, when the selection is made here in the United States? And do you think that regardless of who wins, whether it be Jumpin' Joe, the plagiarist, or Donald J. Trump, regardless of who wins, the violence will escalate? So, class, here is a definition of a vigilante. It's someone who takes the law into his or her own hands by trying and or punishing another person without any legal authority. In the 1800s, groups of vigilantes dispensed what they called frontier justice by holding trials of accused horse thieves, cattle rustlers, and shooters, and then promptly hanging the accused if convicted. That's vigilante justice. I see that coming back. Guineith, do you see that coming back? And do you see an escalation of violence right after the election or selection in the United States and the spreading of it, the violence across the globe?
Yeah, I do. The Democrats have quite bluntly said that even if Donald Trump wins, they are not going to accept the fact that he won. They're going to burn some cities down. That's what they have openly said, right up to that woman who thinks that she's the second in charge. Nancy Pelosi, I believe her name is. She thinks that she's second in line to Donald Trump, and she's kind of ignores the presence of Mike Pence, But the thing is, even if they win, they're still going to burn cities down. And Alex Jones said recently on his show that if Jumping Joe, the pedophile plagiarist Biden, wins, then he fully expects to be executed in short order. He said that on his radio show. And I think that he's probably right, and that he's ready to face that. But if they do that...
Who would be executed? Who would be executed?
Alex Jones said on his radio show recently, within the last week, that if Joe Biden gets selected to be the president, that he fully expects to be executed shortly thereafter. He said that on his radio show.
You mean Alex Jones expects to be executed? Is that?
Yeah, Alex Jones.
Are you saying Alex?
Alex Jones expects to be executed shortly after if Joe Biden is elected president. And if that happens, God forbid if that happens, I like Alex Jones. I think that 99% of what he has to say is right on the money. But if that happens, you can guarantee that is going to throw rocks in the most monumental hornet's nest that you have ever seen. And you will see all of the liberty-minded people in this country explode like hornets if that happens. That will be, if they are stupid enough to do that, that will be the straw that breaks the camel's back. That on its own. And, but you know, that's just one example of how it could happen. And like I say, I really hope that doesn't happen but it's a possibility. And he said on his own radio show, on air, heard by millions and millions of people, that he fully expects that to happen and he's ready for it, you know, and he will go down fighting. But even if they attempt that sort of thing and fail, then you can expect, like I say, not advocating this, but I'm just saying this is how I can see the cow eating the cabbage, that's going to upset a few people, and they're going to get very, very angry about that, and that they're going to take it out on people within their communities. That's how I can see that going down, you know. Whatever way
let's talk about.
You cut this, you're headed for a civil war.
I think we're already in a civil war combined with an American Revolution. It's just the beginning skirmishes of it. Yeah.
Really hot. We're going to go into the really hot phase of it. Here's
what
spread to Australia.
Here's what the other team doesn't understand: that there may be a pact of cooperation among the alternative broadcasters. There may be a pact that they don't understand. We may all be sticking together. We'll be right back. Now, we just heard the bottom of the hour news about an asteroid that's going to do a flyby about 13,000 miles up tomorrow, about the size of a school bus. That's not very far away, 13,000 miles. And asteroids are really, really dense. So they weigh a lot for their physical size. And how fast do they fly by? Between 18 and 20,000 miles an hour. It's really fast. So if one of these were to hit a city, it'd probably demolish it. Even a small one the size of a school bus. Probably destroy a city. Just wanted to make mention of that. Guineith, back to you.
Okay, yeah. So I expect that there is going to be, within the next 6 to 8 weeks, hot civil war breaking out in the United States, and I believe that it will spread to other parts of the world, including and especially Victoria, because there's a lot of people here who have simply had enough. And I've said this on the broadcast before, but I will say it again. And once again, we're not advocating that people do anything. We're just pointing out facts. The most dangerous part of a human being is their mind. Okay? Just because people don't have firearms, it doesn't mean that they're incapable of defending themselves. Because we didn't even have any firearms at all up until about 500 years ago. But people managed to kill each other for the previous, 5,500 years of human history without any firearms at all. And, you know, in the right person's hands, a piece of string is a deadly weapon. A piece of duct tape is a deadly weapon. A plastic bag's a deadly weapon. A pillow's a deadly weapon. Almost anything is a deadly weapon. An old shirt is a deadly weapon. in the right hand. And then you get onto things like pitchforks and shovels and axes and hatchets and that sort of thing. They're all deadly weapons in the right hand. Okay? So, you know, people, the powers that think that they're not going to have a revolution simply because they've banned firearms. For one thing, as I mentioned earlier on in the broadcast, there's a lot of unregistered firearms out there in the community. People are very ingenious in manufacturing their own in difficult circumstances. That's another thing that's been proven over and over again, everywhere from Serbia, Kosovo, to New York City. I mean, in New York City, during the 1960s and 1970s, firearms were almost impossible for gang members to obtain, but that didn't stop them from manufacturing firearms from car aerials and car door locks. And they were called zip guns, okay? And they were generally 9mm. And these were 12, 13, 14, and 15-year-old children were doing this, and they were manufacturing these zip guns out of car antennas, and they were having gang wars with them. And they were stealing 9mm ammunition, usually, or getting people to get it from places where it was obtainable, and, you know, doing this sort of thing. You will never, ever stop people from using deadly force against each other. And that is what constitutes a war. Wars don't even have to involve firearms at all, and most of the wars in the history of the whole world haven't involved firearms because firearms were only invented 500 years ago. This is it. And people forget this, you know. So if the people who think they run the show think that they're going to stop us from having a war because they've, quote-unquote, taken our guns off us, they've got another thing coming, because there's a lot of people out there here in Victoria who have a Ned Kelly mindset and who have a Eureka Stockade mindset. That's simply how it is. That is the culture of this place. And I think, my personal opinion is that that's why they chose Victoria for this massive lockdown, because there's also a lot of Kath and Kims out there, you know. That's a TV series. It originally came from Victoria, from Melbourne, and it was poking fun at the kind of upper middle class airhead woman that unfortunately populates large sections of Melbourne, you know, and their simp husbands. And simp is short for simpering. And if anyone wants to know what simpering means, look it up in a dictionary or go and type it into your favorite search engine. Type in the word SIMP into a search engine or simpering, and you'll see what a simp is. It's a weak man who thinks that he is made a better man by pandering to woman instead of being a man, you know, and actually really standing up against bad things. He picks something that is politically, what he thinks politically correct or politically popular, and pretends to defend some woman against, you know, some perceived infringement on her, and then makes a big deal out of it with the hope of getting in her good graces. And if people think that simps have just been around for the last few years, they've been around forever. They've been around since the dawn of time. And in the English language, we've had the word simpering probably for about the last 600 or 700 years, at least. So that's nothing new. But the simps and the Kath and Kims, the sort of upper middle class airhead, hairstyle and fingernail woman that I'm sure we all know, they will generally fold and they will collapse in a heap because they don't know what to do. They've never had any hardship in their life. They're not tough, and they don't know how to really stand up for themselves, and they've got no backbone. Okay? And I think that the Victorian, that Daniel Andrews and his ilk have made a huge mistake in thinking that every Victorian is a simp or a Kath and Kim type. Okay? And, you know, that's just not how it is. And it's certainly not how it is in country Victoria, because in the early days of Australia, country Victoria was bushranger central, you know, and even into the modern day, modern Melbourne, the Australians have a saying, okay, that when the people from Sydney wanted somebody to be assassinated, they would go to Melbourne and hire a hitman. That was the saying that they had, because the Melbourne gangsters were absolutely notorious. And what I'm waiting for is I'm waiting for the Melbourne gangsters to begin getting fed up and to decide that they have had enough and to figure out what they ought to do about it and to maybe begin to make some allies among the ordinary population of Melbourne. Because Melbourne is positively infested with the underworld community. It's the Chicago of Australia. That's how much underworld activity there is in Melbourne. And I know that they hate the Victoria Police. Even those who in the past have made deals with the Victoria Police, in the last year, they have become so hacked off with the Victoria Police that they were just about ready to, they actually published in the newspapers that they were about ready to go and seek some justice against certain senior Victoria Police officers. Okay? That's what they said. And in public, they said that in public, and it was recorded in the public press, in the newspapers. Okay? And, you know, this is it. I'm waiting for them to decide that they've had enough and that they are going to start, you know, just not taking it anymore. You know, I think that is in Melbourne, that's where it will come from. Because I know that they are a well-armed community, and this is just my wargaming here. I don't know anything. I'm not organising anything. I'm just saying that this is how I can see. Like I said, this is how I think the cow will eat the cabbage. Does that make sense, Vincent?
Yeah. Guineith, you mentioned the word zip, Z-I-P. And, there were zip guns that were manufactured on the East. They were manufactured by individuals who wanted firearms that probably couldn't get them. And so when you mentioned it, I typed in the word zip space gun, and I clicked on images. You might want to try this, class. Go to your favorite search engine. Hopefully it's not Google. Maybe DuckDuckGo, DuckDuckGo.com. And type in the word zip space gun and click on images, and you will see all kinds of homemade guns. And I'm looking at one that kind of amazing. Somebody figured this out. They took an air chisel. Now, for, 40 years, I've had a Craftsman air chisel. So, for example, let's say I want to remove a muffler. It's all rusty. I can't get it off. Take this air chisel, you hook it up to an air hose, and it has a chisel that is an impact. And it goes bang, 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 bang. And it hammers away at the pipe you're trying to cut. And if I have a rusty nut and I can't get it off, I just tap it on the side with this air chisel with a flat point instead of a chisel, and it loosens the nut. Well, there are images of people who've converted that kind of a tool into a pistol. There are other people who have converted a piece of pipe into a pistol. You will not believe the images of these homemade guns. So if you think that, any legislation is going to prevent people from making their own guns, I suggest you do a search on zip guns, and you'll see all kinds of guns. There are people who have taken automatic center punches. I've got one. Like if I want to drill a hole in a piece of metal, I take this automatic center punch, I put it exactly where I want to put a dimple in a piece of metal, press it down, it's spring-loaded, it goes pop, and it puts a depression in the metal, and the drill bit doesn't slide off that. Well, there are those things that have been converted into pistols. I'm not saying you should do it. It's really darn dangerous. You may kill yourself. I was looking up Saturday night specials, and that's the term for a real cheap gun that is really dangerous. And then I looked up a pistol, a double-barrel pistol, percussion cap pistol. I was at a flea market. And there's a guy selling this thing. It's, it didn't work. It was floppy and dangerous, but it's an example of a double-barrel pocket pistol, if you will. Well, maybe a 6-inch barrel. And I don't even know where it is right now, but I bought it. And it was from the 1840s, maybe, the 1830s. And so people have been making, without modern machinery, guns for well over 100 years. So don't think that people are not going to resort to making their own as this country spirals down the drain. Robert in Kansas, welcome.
Morning, Vincent. Hello, Guineith. I wanted to, as a millennial, and then I'm involved politically with movements of younger people too, Zoomers and stuff. I want to give my definition of what I understand it, the word simp, to actually mean from our point of view, that I can gather. And it means the word sympathy. It's short for sympathy, is how we see it. And it's a man who believes that women are equal to men, or that women should have rights. And that's how we see it.
Okay. It's just that they, from what I've seen, because I get my information from my 17-year-old teenage son, basically watching the videos that he watches from time to time, and I got the impression that it came from the word simpering, which has been a word that's been in the English language, like I said, for at least 700 or 800 years. And simpering has always meant a man that offers fake sympathy in order to get into the good graces of a woman. Okay? It's like a fake chivalry. There is such a thing as genuine chivalry, and I really, really admire genuine chivalry. I think that genuine chivalry is a very good thing, but there is a difference between genuine chivalry and simpering behavior, meaning that in the old days, if you were a genuinely chivalrous man and a woman's honor had been impinged, then you might challenge whoever it was who had dishonored this woman. You might challenge him to a duel. Now, that was a matter of life and death, literally, and you didn't do it lightly. And you could duel with pistols, or you could duel with swords, or you could duel with various other weapons. I think there was a long dueling dagger as well that was sometimes used. But that was an aspect of genuine chivalry, okay? It was standing up for the rights of women, especially when they had their honor impinged. But there has always been as well that kind of fake chivalry or simpering behavior, okay? And that is, from what I gather, that is what is being conveyed in the word simp, okay, is a kind of fake chivalry where if there ever was any real, genuine, dangerous threat to the simp, that they would probably pretty quickly back down. Whereas if it was a genuinely chivalrous man, there was a woman who was genuinely getting a bad time, and it was a genuinely chivalrous man, it wouldn't matter to him if the guy who was giving this woman a bad time was 6'4" and he was 5'3". He would stand in that guy's face and he would say, "No, you leave her alone." Okay, now that is genuine chivalry. Okay, but I don't see a lot of that these days. Unfortunately, I wish I saw more of it. Because
they made it illegal, Gwyneth. They make it illegal to be a man now. It's pretty much you get arrested if you're a man, for real.
Well,
that's what it's like here. I'm sure it's the same in Australia.
This is exactly what we're talking about. We need to decide if we're going to do what's legal or if we're going to do the right thing. Because so much of what is legal these days is actually the wrong thing to do. You know,
absolutely.
If you want to colour inside the lines of all their laws, you've almost got to give up your moral character, and I'm not happy to do that. So I've got a saying. I can hear the music, but I would just like to say this. This is like a personal saying of mine. I came up with it. You should be outlaw enough to never be a victim, but righteous enough to never be a problem. And I think that everybody should be like that. And if everybody was like that, I think that the world would have a whole lot less problem.
Right. We're out of time.